Noah Lyles is the fastest man alive, the 100-meter gold medalist, and he is kind of tweaking some people and rubbing people the wrong way. Have you been following some of the comments that Noah Lyles has made? He threw some shade at Anthony Edwards and the NBA, saying that if you win the NBA championship, how can you say that you're the world champions? Because, right here, you want to invite me to an event. He got invited actually to I believe, an Adidas promoted event for Anthony Edwards' new line of sneakers, and basically said that he was too good for it. And then he said, look, Anthony Edwards hasn't even won an NBA championship. And I believe he went so far as to say that even if you did win an NBA championship, how can you call yourself a world champion? Because the NBA is obviously not a world league, at least in terms of where the franchises are located. What do you make of this guy? Are you finding him as annoying as some people are?
Ricky, I watched the Netflix documentary Sprint that was about sprinters, and I actually really liked Noah. But what happened in that 100-meter final, anything he does or says moving forward, I can't, nothing. He's that acting like he was sick when he realized he was in third place, and then went off on the wheelchair like Paul Pierce did, because remember when Paul pooped his pants in that one game, and
I'm sure Paul's glad that you brought that up. There we see him in the after the is that the wheelchair itself?
Yeah.
Are you questioning whether or not he legitimately had COVID?
Did you watch the race? He came out like a house of fire. He was jumping up in the air. He's running around. He was perfectly fine. And then he finished in third. It was like, was it Ben Johnson that looked like he had been shot by a sniper against Michael, who was it? Ben, my brain just stopped. And like the Olympics that one time against Michael Johnson.
If you're asking me to call on my encyclopedic knowledge of track and field history, you're going to be disappointed.
But yeah,
I'm not the guy who's going to be able to bail you out on that one.
So all I know is that he went from jumping around like a crazy person, trying to hype the crowd up before the race, finished third, and then all of a sudden needed ambulatory help. So I don't know. I don't trust him anymore.
Maybe bouncing out like that was the advantage that COVID needed to slow him down. I can certainly tell you that when I had COVID, I wasn't bouncing around like that.
No.
I didn't feel very good when I had COVID. And a quick recovery. This is an amazing recovery. It was a quick onset and perhaps an even quicker passing of the COVID. Look at that. He just shook it off.
Yeah, he did not have long-term COVID.
Like the bronze medalist that he is. Now, this is not long haul COVID, is it?
No.
He's not going to be affected in the long term. Look, some people are saying there's no such thing as bad publicity. And even if he is, some people are saying that he's a sports villain. The most villainous person in sports at the moment. Others have said that, look, track and field could use all the publicity it can get. And yeah, we're not talking about him in the most positive terms right now necessarily, but we're talking about him. So is it good for track and field, even if the guy's kind of a dick? Here we are, we're discussing him. He wouldn't have a segment today if he had been behaving normally, let's say.
Yeah, I guess like you said, all publicity is good publicity, and I guess at some point everybody will forget this, but remember the name Noah Lyles. I guess that was his plan.
Well, yeah, his name's going to be remembered. I don't know if it's going to be for the right reasons, but being a villain will write you down in history sometimes. And I tweeted this morning prior to the show, asked the audience over on Super 70s Sports on X, who is the all-time greatest sports villain? And you can see there, I didn't necessarily make a vote. Sometimes I'll say I'll start and I'll make a vote. I did put Bill Laimbeer up there, however, as one of the unquestionable, probably first names that's going to spring to mind for people when they think of sports villains, unless you're from Detroit. I know you Detroit fans who defend and love the bad boys will ride or die with that dirty, cheap shotting bastard forever. But for the rest of us, he rubbed us the wrong way. Certainly in Boston and in Chicago, the memories of Bill Laimbeer aren't quite as fond, and in a lot of other cities around the country as well. Ronnie, when I say all-time, top of the list sports villains, who comes to mind for you?
I mean, I'm so biased here, and this isn't going to be a universal one, but look over my shoulder. It's also from the state of Michigan. Is Jim Harbaugh is the villain of all villains. Like, wow. I hate that guy. I hate his face. I hate his family. Well, I do actually like his brother, but his mom and dad, just strike me as kind of weird. I hate this guy with a
going after
passion.
Harbaugh's parents today. Wow. But this is more of like a regional hatred, right? I mean, Jim Harbaugh, is
100%.
Is he 100%. Universally hated, or is this just a Buckeye bias that you have?
I think a lot of people think he's weird because he's really a weird dude. But
he's weird. He's a little weird.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily make him a villain.
Well, he's a villain to me, and this is a show about authenticity, and I think he's a villain. So, I mean, he's a villain.
All right. I'm pushing back. I like the fact that you are just defiantly going to tell me, go to hell, Ricky Cobb.
I mean,
I hate Jim Harbaugh.
If you want to feed me the villains that you want to hear, then shoot me over a text, and I'll say that. But it's Harbaugh.
Yeah. Are you going to shit on my villains now? You can defend. You can defend the integrity of my villains.
We'll see.
Look, I don't necessarily dislike this guy right now in present day, but I will say that the guy that I probably dislike the most at one time, and probably, I mean, Laimbeer's up there, but Christian Laettner, as you know, me being from Kentucky, Christian Laettner cut the heart out of an entire state and did it while just acting like a douche nozzle the entire time, which made him, he stepped on one of our guys' chest. He didn't miss a shot. He kind of just ruined the psyche of so many of us. I loved when they replayed that game. I'm, of course, talking about the East Regional Final in the 1992 NCAA tournament. Some people think it's the greatest basketball game ever played or the greatest college basketball game ever played. Duke over Kentucky, 104-103 in overtime. Rick Pitino making the decision not to put someone on Grant Hill on the inbounds pass. Somehow in 1.8 seconds, Laettner is able to catch the ball, actually put it on the floor once, turn around, and look, if you haven't seen the fadeaway jumper, I don't even know why you're watching this show, but go to YouTube if you want to see Christian Laettner destroy an entire state. So I was very biased against Christian Laettner for a long time. He was my gold standard.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one like you argued with mine. So you're good.
You're just going to be a more cooperative, kinder person.
I want to keep my job.
We were discussing this before. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're a total dick to me when we're not on air. It's amazing how nice you are when the cameras start rolling. I don't know about this. Here's another one of mine. Barry Bonds. Look how skinny Barry Bonds is there. People forget what a string bean this kid was when he came up for the first several years that he was in the major leagues. Pretty much the entire time he was with the Pirates, and Even after he joined the Giants several seasons into his career, he wasn't a big guy. Griffey, if anything, might have had a size advantage on Bonds in those days. And as I tweeted there, strange how 10 years later, one of these guys looked exactly the same and the other one looked like Brock Lesnar. Barry Bonds, obviously, much like yourself with the Ozempic, Barry Bonds was not clean, I think it's fair to say. And I always, I think people are softening on this. I'm seeing sort of the generational change in the views about Barry Bonds. A lot of us that experienced that era in baseball and watched Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa chase down Roger Maris, and we were all so excited about it. You got to remember, right? Baseball had the strike in '94. It was still suffering from the World Series being canceled. And again, a little callback to the beginning of the show, the Montreal Expos really got screwed that year. They had the best record in baseball, if I'm not mistaken, in '94, and lost their opportunity at winning a World Series that might have ultimately saved the franchise. But I digress. McGwire and Sosa at the time, it's hard to overstate how popular those guys were and how much they captured the public imagination. Everybody loved those guys. Now they've become pariahs. Sammy, for a long time, has been basically persona non grata at Wrigley Field. I don't know if that is softening at all, but the guy had 360 home run seasons in a 4-year span. Mark McGwire hit 70 home runs in a season, and those guys really resuscitated baseball. Barry Bonds saw that happen, knew that he was a better player than either of those guys, which is unquestionably true, far better player than either of those guys, certainly more dimensions to his game. And I think he was like, well, you know what? I know you guys are cheating and you're getting all this glory. I'm going to take some of this special sauce myself, and then you're really going to see some shit. And that's what happened. Barry Bonds had a season where I believe and we all know he hit 73 in 2001, and that's a record that very likely will never be broken. Seems as unlikely now as it did when I was growing up as a kid. I just don't think anybody's ever going to sniff that. But 73 homers in a season, but he had a year where he had an on-base percentage of over 600, if I'm not mistaken. So Barry Bonds, all of that being said, the thing that rubs me the wrong way is he got Hank Aaron's home run record. And the 755 is now number 2 all time. And Barry Bonds, you can't tell me that at least 8 of the home runs that he needed to catch and pass Henry Aaron, because Bonds retired with 762. You cannot tell me that those weren't aided by the steroids or the human growth hormone or the combination of which. What say you, Ronnie?
I mean, wasn't it the clear and the cream? Isn't that what he did? Barry Bonds? Yeah,
the clear and the cream. I don't know that he has ever admitted to it. Gary Sheffield said that he got some stuff unknowingly from Barry Bonds, and the taint of Barry Bonds so strong that Gary Sheffield basically is not in the Hall of Fame due to that. I know that you want to make a Deshaun Watson comment so badly right now. Are you going to be able to control yourself? I use taint correctly on this show, but that's a word
12.
that I can't use around somebody who has the maturity of a 12-year-old. Let's go right now to one of my all-time favorite television broadcasters, anchors, play-by-play guys, you name it. A guy who has done it all, a guy who has covered the NFL, the NBA, MLB, college basketball, golf, auto racing. I'm leaving things out. Horse racing. The list goes on and on. The great Chris Myers joins the show right now. And Chris Myers, welcome to the program. You have been a Super 70 sports follower going way back. And I got a great kick. The first time that I saw that you were following me over on X, that was a little badge of honor because I have so much respect for you, sir.
Well, thank you. No, it's nice of you to say, and I love it. That's how I really, I was born in the '60s, but child of the '70s, especially with sports, which became my life. And I love your sense of humor on that. Some people get a little offended, but it's really, if you don't follow, you should, because it's informative, entertaining, takes us back, and helps us connect with some of the things that are going on now.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to touch on that because you really had your formative years. I'm the super 70s guy, but I was born in 71. So I kind of just decided I was the 70s guy, even though you were really the right age to really fully appreciate the 70s in a way that I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was the preteen years and then becoming a teenager. So yeah, and growing up in Miami, South Florida, right? There was, the disco era. In fact, the radio station that I began working at as a teenager was around the corner from the studio where the Bee Gees were recording during their hit years. So,
Wow.
and of course, the Dolphins, being the home of the Dolphins in their perfect season. Yeah, there was a lot of that. Yeah, and there wasn't obviously ESPN Sports Center, there wasn't Fox Sports and the kind of channels, the NFL Network, and the places that we have now to go to. So as a sports fan, you took what you could get on the radio, back with newspapers or the sporting news or whatever you had. But it was a great time to be a sports fan. And growing up in the '70s, and I had the Farrah Fawcett poster with the red bathing suit thing. That was, but everything else was sports. That's kind of how.
That is so strong. All right, so I do want to take a little bit of a dive into the '70s with you today, and also talk about really, as I've said, one of the most distinguished careers in broadcasting, that resumes that anyone could boast. But I don't want to bury the lead here. I am really excited about your book. I have to tell you that deserves a wow is the title of the book, which is obviously perfectly on brand. That is Chris Myers through and through. Forward written by Bill Murray, which is incredible. And I believe that it is available for pre-order currently as we speak, both on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. Chris, first of all, when is this book going to drop? And as I've said, go ahead, you see there on the screen, get in on this now and grab this thing. I'm sure that it's going to be a big seller. I'm absolutely going to read it. Chris, tell me a little bit about the book, when it's going to drop, and the experience that you had writing this, going back and looking at what must be a treasure trove of stories and anecdotes from throughout your career.
Yeah, thank you. The most difficult part was fitting which stories we were going to put in the book. And a number of those, including and Bill Murray, the connection going back to the ESPYs. This is kind of it's a sports book. It's a mixture through kind of my eyes of some wow events, and we use the word wow often, more than we probably realize. And some events that you use wow, you go like wow, like that's not so great. It's a blend of, if you think of the movies, It's Almost Famous and Forrest Gump, and you rolled them together and put sports in there. That's kind of like my view of things from a teenager in radio, how I got into the radio business, and then the growth of being a part of ESPN for a decade, and then with Fox Sports for the last 2 decades, and the people you've interviewed through the process on the big events, being at the World Series when the Red Sox finally broke through in '04, and interviewing Johnny Damon on the field moments after, and chasing down Tom Brady, and the greatest at the time was the only overtime Super Bowl comeback when they came back against the Atlanta Falcons, and interviewing him live for a national audience. And then some unusual interviews. Mike Tyson, after the ear-biting incident when he almost attacked me, is in the book. Certainly the O.J. Simpson interview, which still all these years later, and that kind of happened by accident, but the first live interview with him after not only the double murder trial, but the wrongful death lawsuit, and that when he was found accountable. So there's some fun stories in there with Charles Barkley and Bill Murray. There's some personal attachments to our lives and how sports mirrors that. So I hope, people get a chance. I think it'll be inspirational for people. And then there's those difficult moments that I was placed in, Ricky, that, as a sports guy, you're there to have fun and cover events. But then I was there for the Earthquake World Series with the A's and the Giants. I was there at the Olympic bombing in Atlanta when we thought it was a lot worse. And then I was there for the tragedy of Dale Earnhardt. We were broadcasting. It was Fox's first Daytona 500 and the loss of Dale Earnhardt. So how I felt behind the scenes and how you deal with those situations as a broadcaster, and of course the fun years of SportsCenter with a lot of great personalities, those golden years I call them. So that's all kind of in the book, and I hope people enjoy it and check it out. But thank you for the mention.
Oh, absolutely. I think that that description of being kind of a cross between Almost Famous and Forrest Gump that's a really interesting way to look at it. And as you said, I mean, you really have ended up by chance, circumstance in these scenarios, many of which, as you just detailed, situations that I'm sure you would have rather not been in some of those cases. Let me ask you about the OJ interview, particularly the first one after the verdict. Tell me a little bit about that. What was going through your mind, and as a journalist, how did you really sort of approach that and feel that you wanted to hit the right notes with how that interview was conducted?
Well, the first thing is, just like when you're doing sports, even you go into a game when you're calling it or interview, you're unbiased. And even if you're a little tilted, hey, I like this guy or this coach, or I grew up a fan, you have to be fair, at least to the audience, and professional in that regard. So with O.J. Simpson, first, when the news broke that this had gone on, I was like, well, maybe it can't be true. And then you watch the trial, and then we were all glued. It really was the trial of the century. It was unbelievable. Anyway, he had watched the show up close that I was doing on ESPN. We were trying to have him on long before, and he had been on. We were going to have him on the show before the murder trial and the events of his life. But when he said he and his lawyer wanted to come on, and because he thought I was fair the way I interviewed people, this was the first live interview. He turned down Barbara Walters because she would only tape it, and he didn't want somebody taping an interview and editing. So the two conditions for him were it had to be live, and I couldn't ask about his children. And I said, well, if I can ask about everything else, then obviously in this trial, then we'll have you on and we can make it live. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. We extended. It was almost 50. You can still actually go watch the full interview on YouTube as it was. But I studied for that. I had some time, and obviously not being a sportscaster, not being a lawyer, a judge, but obviously I watched the trial like everybody else. But I had great access to various legal information. And Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor who put Manson away, I talked to him about dealing with somebody in this case. One of OJ's main attorneys in the trial that got him off told me kind of on the side, hey, I wouldn't do the interview. And I said, why is that? He said, well, everybody attached to him is negative. And some of that will be in the book. So the preparation was key, so that because people told me that OJ can spin his narcissistic lies and make people look stupid in a live situation. And so that was to have that information ready. I saw things that maybe the jury didn't even get to see, police documentation, photos, things like that. So to answer your question, and sorry to ramble, Rick, there's so much in here that I don't know where to finish it. But I went in open-minded. There was no way he didn't do it in my eyes after studying and preparing for this. So I had to be fair when I questioned him. Yes, I was going to ask the questions that people wanted to ask that they watched, but I wasn't going to be the judge and the jury myself. And the tough question was, are you capable of killing? That was the one, or one of the tougher ones that we kind of spilled and got a hint. But I wanted people to decide for themselves in this interview after watching him, did he do it in their eyes? This was a different way of putting him on trial after the trials.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Did you know OJ at all prior to the murder case? Had you had any interactions with him?
No, briefly had, been around him because he was in the media business and entertainment. And we were taping the ESPN Up Close show previously out in Los Angeles. So we passed at different events and hello, that type of thing. But he had this lovable, likable personality. So that's why you were shocked when you heard about it. And then when you dig deeper, you see. And I think ultimately his greatest punishment, before obviously he was later arrested, was that this was a guy who really needed his ego, this public approval, at any scale, at any price. And the fact that he was kind of shunned by most of society afterwards while walking on the earth was probably his punishment before the later arrest, which is the irony of it all. Talk about karma being jailed. But yeah, there were some interesting things in the interview. Remember, we were live and we were talking about his wife. We're showing photos of his wife, ex-wife, I should say, as much as we could show when he had his domestic violence charges. And I was asking him about that. And we go to a commercial break, and his media rep comes running out of the green room and is yelling to me, "You can't ask these questions." And OJ was like, "No, go in there. I got this. This is fine." And then he turns to me in a casual moment and says, "Hey, I got a tea time out at Riviera Golf Country Club next week, and we have an opening if you want to, in our foursome, if you want to join us." And I was like shocked, because we're in between this interview live off the air, and we're coming back in 60 seconds. And it just kind of showed me his I don't know, disengagement, whatever you wanted to call it. But there were moments in the interview he tried to be intimidating. But at the end, I mean, he was the one guy all those interviews I've ever done that I never really shook his hand. I just thanked him for being on, and he sarcastically said, "Hey, it was great talking sports with you." And of course, we didn't talk sports for the 50 minutes. And some people didn't want me to do the interview and criticized me because they thought, hey, you're putting a killer on the air and he's going to try to repair his image and that type of thing. But we left it up to the audience to decide. And there wasn't any doubt in my mind. The hard part was just being fair about it in the interview.
Yeah, fascinating, and I can't wait to read about this and so much more. But Chris, you don't, obviously, I would think you don't go into the career that you chose without being a fan. So when you were growing up in the 70s, taking it back to your childhood, and as you said, you were kind of the perfect age to experience the 70s as a young guy. I think as well. Who were your favorite athletes, and what were the things about sports that caused you to fall in love with sports?
Yeah, I had some obscure, at the time in South Florida, the Dolphins were really the only thing, right? They didn't have their own NBA or Major League Baseball franchise, but we had spring training. And so the Orioles were down there in Miami, and Vero Beach was where the Dodgers were. And so from a baseball standpoint, the Jim Palmer Orioles, that kind of success, and then Steve Garvey, the Dodgers, I kind of became attached to that group, with that solid infield and Lasorda's early teams. But ironically, I connected, believe it or not, to LA area sports, even though I was in Miami. Of course, the Dolphins with Bob Gracie and the no-name defense and the great Don Shula. But I connected somehow to the Los Angeles Rams. And I hope you can appreciate Roman Gabriel, who wore number 18, later played for the Eagles. Sure. Yeah, and was and I think deserves to be in the Hall of Fame when you compare numbers. Yeah, he never got to a Super Bowl, but when you look at his numbers and the kind of physical quarterback he was and what he did with the Rams team, and they had some great players through. So those were a few of them that kind of jumped out at me. But I think what attracted me was, the kind of the live unpredictability of it all. When I would first, supposed to be doing my homework in the room, and I'm listening on the radio in the background, and we only would get Atlanta Braves baseball on radio, and then of course you had them on TV with the Superstation and the Cubs with WGN. So those teams, and they weren't really good teams at the time in terms of, when I say good, contending, but they were baseball, and they had unique announcers and personalities that stuck with me. Obviously, Harry Carey, Milo Hamilton, Ernie Johnson Sr., and they had kind of an influence on me. And away from sports, I was always a fan. My other hobbies were comedians and talk show hosts. I loved Johnny Carson and would watch, whether it was Merv Griffin or Mike Douglas, whatever interview show, if Joey Bishop was on late at night and I could stay up. So I kind of blended all of those together because sports had a lot of that. And it was fun. I, as an athlete myself, trying through high school, whatever. I played sports. I wasn't that great. Maybe but I never really wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to cover the athletes, interview them, talk to them, find out about the kind of people they were. So that was kind of my draw. And it was I would call it an escape, but coming from a big family and trying to find my way as a young teenager. I called in. I don't want to drag out the story, but this is how I got into the business. I would call in on a talk show in Miami, WKAT radio. It was called Sportsline, 2-hour nightly talk show, and I was Chris from Miami. And you were supposed to only call once a night or once in a few days. And then I would disguise my voice and call back. This is before caller ID. And I would be like Duke from North Miami, who had this kind of deeper sounding, almost a John Wayne rerun voice. And I would agree with my earlier call just so I could get on the air to talk more. And I had this going for a year, and they had fan night, and they invited both of me down to this radio station to appear with some other regular callers. And that's when my dad had to drive me down there. I didn't have my license, and I had to tell him that, hey, I wasn't being real honest there. But that's what got me into the door to work weekends while I was still in high school.
Well, I'm not surprised at the Johnny Carson influence. I was a huge Did You Know fan back in the ESPN days, and
all right.
You would do the I did not know that, which
right.
There's a little Carson in that, right?
Yes, if you don't, you'll love this story, and this is in the book. Okay, true story. Mike Tirico and I are doing the late Sports Center, and we would have some time at the end to fill, and he'd throw out a fact, and my Carson influence of growing up, I would say, I did not know that. And so the producer later says, why don't we? Barry Sachs, I believe, was our executive, a great guy, may he rest in peace. Why don't we have a regular segment? Call it, I did not know that. I said, well, Johnny Carson, that's really his line. It might be stealing. So they said, well, let's call it Did You Know? And so that became kind of a standard segment. So true story here. I'm later out in LA after doing the sports centers in Connecticut, and I'm at the Mercedes-Benz tennis tournament at UCLA, and I'm off duty. I'm not working here, but I'm just watching tennis kind of as a fan sitting, and I see over, and he was a big tennis fan, Johnny Carson. This is after he stopped from his show in the late 90s here. And you don't want to bother a guy. He's quiet. He's watching. He's an intense tennis fan. But I just thought, if I don't go over there now and just say something, right? This is my idol outside of sports. Then I'll miss the chance of a lifetime. So I waited in between a match, whatever, and I kind of slipped in over to him, and I just said, "Hey, I hate to interrupt. There was a little bit of a break in the action, Mr. Carson, but I'm Chris Myers." And he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Well, I just wanted you to know that." And I heard that they had watched a little bit of Sports Center and the tennis stuff back in the day. I said, "I want you to know that Did You Know segment is from, I grew up kind of watching you and used to do, I did not know that. And that really is formed because of you. And it's become a staple, a regular in the Sports Center show." And he paused and he looked at me and he said, I did not know that. And then he walked away. True story. You can't make it up.
Oh my God. I love it. What a beautiful story to wrap this up. The book is That Deserves a Wow. The man is Chris Myers. Chris, thank you so much for the support that you've given me over on X and for being right here. The second show that we've ever done. It's a privilege to have you on today.
No, well, keep up the good work. I really, very entertaining, very enjoyable. There's a lot more, and I love following you. So you holler at me anytime, and I'd love to talk with you again.
Thank you so much. Wish you great success with the book.
All right, you take care, Rick.
Elon Musk is slated to interview Donald Trump tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have in sort of stopping that, or stopping the spread of that, or sort of intervening in that? Some of that was about campaign misinformation, but it's a wider thing, right?
Yeah, no, and you've heard us talk about this many times from here, about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but we believe that they have the responsibility. These are private companies, so we're also mindful of that too. But look, it is. I think it is incredibly important to call that out as you're doing. I just don't have any specifics on what we have been doing internally as it relates to the interviews. Not something that I'm tracking, and I'm sure the president's not tracking it either.
I've got to tell you, I've about fucking had it with the attacks on free speech in this country. Is it suddenly a radical opinion to believe that people should have the right to speak their mind. I'm not talking about people who are making what have traditionally been considered incitements to violence. Those things have never been okay. But I'm talking about what we have now, where it's just, if you disagree with me, we're going to call it misinformation. If you disagree with me, we're going to call that hate speech. And all of that is oftentimes, as we're seeing in modern days, very, very, very subjective. And as I've said, and look, I'm gonna sit here on this show and I'm gonna say it repeatedly until I'm blue in the face. As long as we are seeing this march towards lessening our civil liberties in what I consider to be the greatest country in the world, my grandfather manned a machine gun during World War II as an 18-year-old kid, and he didn't do that for you and I to not be able to express ourselves freely in the public forum in this country. Ronnie, I know that we share the same philosophy in terms of how we view this issue. What are you thinking when you see things like a reporter from the Washington Post talking about what are we supposed to do about misinformation and speech that could be dangerous, whatever it was exactly that he said, and the guy's talking about an interview that hadn't even fucking happened yet. What are we even doing here? It used to be that the media was at the forefront of protecting speech because they were the watchdogs who felt that they needed to be able to call it as they saw it. And now we've got this country where, I don't know if you saw it, Ron, but there was a poll that was referenced in the New York Post last week. 53% of Americans believe that there should be more restriction on free speech in this country. What the hell is going on?
Dude, you cannot hate the media enough at this point. They're the devil. The reason it's 53% is because the media brainwashed a lot of those people. I'm going to do a callback to the Chris Meyer interview. He mentioned that people were a little, miffed. They're like, why are you going to do an interview with OJ? And he said, Chris literally said just now on the interview he did with, he said, we're just going to put it out there and we're going to let the people decide. That's what it used to be. Put the information out, let the people decide. That's not happening anymore. You cannot hate the media enough right now.
Ron, I always say I'm a believer in what is called the marketplace of ideas. Let everyone speak. Let common sense prevail. Let the best opinions logically rise like cream to the top. And if somebody wants to speak their mind and say something that is stupid, to say something that some might deem hateful, or maybe in some cases outright is hateful. There's a difference between something that is, putting somebody's life at jeopardy and somebody who just says something that's nasty or rude or unfair. All of these things, I think that those people should be called out. I think other people should use their free speech to admonish, ridicule, do whatever they have to do to put the people who are wrong in their place by using intellect and reason, not by saying we're all babies and we shouldn't be able to speak. Because as I tweeted, if the people who think that there should be restrictions on free speech are obviously under the wrongful impression that the people who are in power will always agree with them. It's easy to be in favor of free speech when you agree with something. Everybody's in favor of the voices being heard that are speaking the opinions that you believe in, but it takes being willing to also stand up for the rights of people to say things that you disagree with, perhaps even that offend you, that you find repugnant. The people who will defend that are the people that have American values and the First Amendment in their hearts. And I would like to think that I belong to that group of people, Ronnie.
Ricky, I couldn't agree with you more. As in finances and business, what you said about ideas and thoughts, the market always speaks. It always speaks every single time, and you find out what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. The market always speaks.
Well, if we could get that back up on the screen briefly, the Elon Musk, Donald Trump, you can see here between roughly 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Trump's space post got 73 million views. During the same period, there were 4 million posts about it on X, and those posts, by the time that we are here right now, over 1 billion views, clicks, however that's being measured. The people obviously wanted to see this, and I have to believe that there's a lot of people, for whatever reason, they're afraid that whatever was going to be said between Elon Musk and Donald Trump was going to resonate with some people, and they decided that they would much rather people not have access to the points of view that they disagree with, rather than people having the opportunity to listen to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and, as I believe is the most American thing of all, decide for yourself based on the merits of what you believe those people have said. You're talking about people who wanted to preemptively stop this from happening, not people who said, hey, there was a problem here, I'm offended by this or I'm offended by that. And God knows we've got a lot of people taking offense at everything in this society. We need to cinch up, pull up our big boy pants, understand that we're the leaders of the free world, and that America has been a very successful experiment for a reason. And we can't just assume that we're going to remain a strong country indefinitely forever just because we have been one historically.
Ricky, I hope that Musk made the exact same offer to Harris. Even though I don't like her policies, I don't like her vice president, I hope he made the same offer to her. Now, obviously, part of the reason I hope he made the same offer to her is because she wouldn't be looking at a teleprompter and we would really find out who she is. But she should have, I hope she has the same opportunity for 1 billion people to see what she has to say, and then let the people decide. Because right now, I don't feel like the people have an opportunity to really make the decision, a correct decision, because we don't know. We don't know what she thinks. And Trump is being hidden by every other media outlet.
Yeah, say what you will about Donald Trump, but you know, he is out there putting his opinions forth, speaking often off the cuff. You never know what he's going to say. You may not agree with all of it. And certainly I don't agree with everything that he says by any means. I didn't vote for the guy in 2016 or 2020, but the thing that frightens me the most right now in American society, and I think that we really have to be careful of, you know, going back to what we talked about yesterday with the UK, I think the European Union issued a statement basically putting Elon Musk on notice for potential misinformation or hate speech, however it is it's being characterized. It all tends to get dumped into those two buckets. Either we're going to say because we disagree with you that what you're saying is inaccurate, or we're going to say because we disagree with you what you're saying is hateful. And again, one person's hateful is another person's truth. And so, yeah, I mean, I do believe you shouldn't be able to stand up and shout fire in a crowded theater. I'm not arguing for that. But that's always been the case. And as I was saying earlier this morning when I was doing an appearance with Stuart Varney, look, I historically have been a liberal. I was a liberal kid in Kentucky in my early 20s in a very rural, conservative environment. And one of the reasons that I identified as a liberal is that I was pretty much a free speech absolutist. I believe that you have the right to be wrong, that you have the right to say unpopular things, that you have the right to say even offensive things, because that is a big part of what has separated America from fascist countries, from authoritarian countries, and the government getting a death grip on the people oftentimes begins with preventing the people's opportunity to speak out against the government or to speak out against anything that they disagree with. And we saw it during COVID, Ronnie. Look back at the COVID era. People were getting suspended from then Twitter. People were getting deplatformed. We were hearing everything about horse dewormer, and if you suggested that it was possibly a lab leak, that was dangerous misinformation. The problem here with misinformation, disinformation, and distinguishing things as hate speech is who is the all-knowing, all-wise arbiter of these things. And as I've said before, oftentimes, and look, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, an independent, whatever your political sensibilities are. I think most of us can agree that oftentimes the people who are in power, when I was a child, here's one of the things I've learned as a grown-up. When I was a child, I believed that the people that were in power for a reason, and they were smart, and they knew more than the average person. And that's why they were a Congress. When I was in first grade, there was a book about what career do you want to have. And I remember that the teacher was assigning careers to students. And I don't know if we had to write a paper about it or role play it or whatever it was. And mine was congressman. And so 7-year-old me believed that being a congressman was a really sort of sacred thing because you were going to represent the people. And my sort of idealistic childhood understanding of politics was that our politicians were wise people who knew more than average folks. And I've come to believe now that while we do have certainly some wise people who are in elected government, I'm not going to hit everybody with a broad brush here, but I will say oftentimes the people who are in charge aren't as smart as the people that they're making decisions for. And Ronnie, I don't know about you, but when I look at a lot of the people that I see in Washington, I don't think that they're fucking qualified to decide what Ricky Cobb can or can't say.
First off, you went from wanting to be a congressman to being a funny tweet guy, so that's a pretty impressive jump. But I hate that I feel this way. I hate that this is where I've become, but I now think that a majority, I'm not going to say all, I think a majority of the people that go to Washington go there because they want to get rich. Like they see it as an opportunity to get rich. And that's terrible. It's awful that's what I think. And I'm sure a lot of other people think it too. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, I think power and wealth are very attractive lures, generally speaking, to anyone. And I don't know. Everybody has a different motivation for going into that career, I'm sure. But I think that in a lot of cases, you're very likely correct.
Well, it seems like when I see these, and again, I can only go off of what I read, and I'm sure sometimes it's wrong and it's skewed to make me feel this way. But it seems like a lot of people that go into to politics come out a lot richer than when they went in, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me in terms of what the job was supposed to be.
The salaries aren't all that great.
No.
They're not all that great. So yeah, it's interesting how that goes. So look, Ron, I'm getting myself all worked up. I can feel the blood pressure rising because free speech is, man, that is my hot button issue in 2024 because I see the path that these other countries are on, and we need to take a detour here in America. We're better than that, and I hope that we remember it.